Hi everybody, this is Dustin from Tech for Humans, and today we're going to be covering a different kind of technology. We're actually going to be covering, believe it or not, a traditional media technology. This isn't something that gets taught necessarily a lot in schools, and I really wish it was. So what we're going to be covering is essentially black concept markers, right? Really gray tones. And it's important to note what they're for. They're really for laying in tone very quickly, sketching really quickly. And so we're going to go over some of the basics of what's important. So here I've got, essentially, Blick Studio Cool Gray markers. Now there's cool grays and there's warm grays. I've gotten rid of all my warm grays because I prefer the cool gray markers. But these come in what are called percent. So this is a cool gray 10% marker. It has a broad tip right here for big, nice, broad strokes, and it has fine tip on the other end, right? These come in packs of, I believe, 10 or 11. It includes 2 plain black markers. And you really do want to get the Blick brand. They're about maybe $30, and they're a lot cheaper than the Prismacolor, and in my opinion, they are just about as good. What you don't want to skimp on is your fine line markers. In my opinion, the Prismacolor ones are definitely worth it. So this is a Prisma, it's kind of a little worn here, but it is a 08 marker. And again, in my opinion, these things are just fantastic. This one is a 005 and it's well worn. I tend to use these quite a bit. These give you extremely fine lines. So let's talk about what that means. So with the 08 right here, we've got a 08 marker. It gives us a nice, clean line, which is, I mean, that's just a great line. It dries pretty quickly, minimal smudging, which is nice. Not like super good, and you can't quite tell what's there on the camera, but there is a little bit of smudging right there. And then over here is the 005, which gives us an incredibly light line. I mean, we're talking just crazy thin line. You can get extremely light with this. You can feather it because these are functionally markers, and so it's very much worth it. Now, in terms of laying in tone, let's talk about what these markers do really quick. So I'm just going to outline a couple of bubbles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, right? Those are my 10 little bubbles. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and fill these in with the simplest color. So I'm going to start off with the 10%. Here we go, 10% gray. I'm just going to go with a fine tip. Now sometimes this goes in a little bit lighter or a little bit darker. It depends on how dry this outer edge here is, but you can see this is barely anything. This is hardly anything at all, and in fact it will dry lighter than this. I like to use the 10% for laying in just a temporary mark, just so that I get a sense of what a darker mark would look like without having to mark it up permanently, right? So we're going to go in with a fine tip 20%. Right like that. And you notice that these leave down a very smooth block of color. The color kind of pools and evens out and kind of works its way across the surface. It gives you a nice even tone with minimal bleed, which is really quite nice. Right. That's what our 30. Here's our 40%. Like that. So we're getting darker and darker. That's 50%, right? This is 50% towards black. Alright. This is our 60% tone. Now, for all intents and purposes, most people would say that's getting right towards black, but it's not. It actually gets a lot more close, a lot closer than that. Right? Very nice. So that was what, 70%? Getting towards 80%. that most people would swear that's black. And you could be right. However, there is differences between black and that particular shade. And it's only when you directly compare and contrast them do you actually see that. Here's the 90%. Right. This is your pigment. Right. 90% of the way to black. And finally, here is black. Right. So as you can see, you get a nice good range of lights and darks. I find that when I am doing inking with these, usually what I'll do is I'll go and do every other. The 10% is pretty light. I feel like it's lighter. In fact, that marker might even be wearing out a little bit. But I'll go, let's say, instead of putting 20 and 30 together and contrasting those together, I'll actually put 20 and 40 together. So let's do a quick example there. So here is 20%, right? 20% line. And I could contrast 30% with it, right? And that's not bad. I mean, there's definitely a difference there. But a stronger contrast, a better contrast, would actually be with 40%. Right. So that's a lot better. So if I just do those side by side, 40 and 20. Right. It tends to look a little stronger than just one or the other. So it's a good idea to make sure that you're varying how far you're contrasting these together. So with that being said, we're going to kind of get on with our project. Take a look at some of the individual pieces that I'm working on tonight. So, in one of my classes, I'm working on a tabletop game. I'm either going to be 3D printing out these models, or I'm going to use BattleBox to play test the components and things like that. Probably a little bit of both. A little drink of water there. But I've taken my basic ships, and it doesn't matter if you can't read this too much right now. But I have several different types of ships. I've got a capital ship, a battle cruiser, a battleship, a cruiser, and a destroyer. And these are space battleships. And I went through and I just found basic descriptions of what essentially each one is. And it's kind of broad. They're kind of categorizations more than they are specific characteristics. But I've also gone through and picked what kind of stats they're going to have. And, over here is the main description. What that means in terms of my stats, and just what it, a good general description of what this type of ship is for. So that's kind of what I've been going through doing. I have a few areas to fill in here, but it's all right to go through and start doing a little bit of the art at this point. So that being said, I'm going to start off with kind of my middle ground ship, which I'll just bring this right back over here real quick, which is really my battleship, because that's the most common one. That's the most obvious one that everything's based off of. Now, I am a big fan of Halo, the Halo series, I should say, and when I was basically blocking out the ideas for these ships, I had that in mind. So you can tell this is very like Pillar of Autumn, and that's okay. It's, I'm just deriving it from that basic shape. They have this very gun barrel shape, and I feel like that's very cool. But I do ultimately, I think, want to push them more towards conventional battleships. But if I go too far into like the, away from the Halo gun to the conventional battleships, I'll run smack dab into like 40K, which is like all upside down conventional battleships. So I want to avoid that. But I'm going to focus in on just primarily the main battleship tonight. So we'll just put that one right here. And I'm going to go in and do a little bit of detailing on this thing. Now, I have outlined the basic sketches. I have this little, antenna thing here. I know I need something here, but I don't know what. I'll probably not shade that for now, and we'll just work with it. So some details. Main cannons. I've decided to go with dual cannons for each ship. Kind of a 1-2 punch. Thrusters in the back. Shielding around the engineering section. These are going to be essentially like broadside cannons and guns. Maybe I'll use this as like a turret gun, something that can track around and who knows what. Either that or just again, get rid of it. I haven't decided if these are going to be like missile pod bays or troop bays or something like that. It's kind of hard to say exactly what I want to do with it, but we'll just kind of let it go. Now this is just a thumbnail. This is just the beginning, but I do want to give it some depth and form, so maybe I could get started with it. Since you guys are really not going to see the 10%, I'm going to work very quickly with this just to outline how I work with it. The first thing I do with the 10% is I'll go through and just kind of outline roughly where I know some of those darks are going to be. And again, it's not even really showing up here, and even in this light, it's not relevant. But this is generally an excellent place to get started, especially if you're feeling nervous about it, because those subtle differences in tone make a difference. That being said, I've been using these for quite a while. I'm going to jump straight to 20%. So I'm going to start off just kind of doing what I like to call an ambient occlusion run. Anywhere that there's going to be some natural shadowing, where you have things overlapping, I'm going to want to just lay in a little bit of tone there, right like so. Make sure I got my focus right here. Focus. Right in there is pretty good. There we go. And I'm going to outline a little bit of the roundness of this entire structure, right? Just kind of right in here, just outlining the basics. Anywhere that's underneath or down, right? So anywhere the light is casting from the top, which is how I usually do these initial stages. It's going to, highlight things that are specifically on the bottom, right? I'm going to give this a nice round edge to it. Same thing over here. Right. And I'm working with a fine tip because this is a fairly small drawing. If this was a large drawing, I'd be working with a large one. At some point, I will be redoing this in a perspective on this entire thing, just to kind of give it a little bit of wow. But for right now, just real simple and small. No need to hurry. No need at all. Now there is a difference here, but I'm going to have to outline that with a darker tone at a later point. Although there are other ways of doing that as well. Right. Okay, so that's pretty good, right? I'm liking that. I'm going to then go through a little bit with my fine-tipped marker. This is going to be my 005. Right. And just push some of the edges of these a little bit, right? And I want to showcase areas that are going to really push those shapes. So for instance, we're highlighting the bottom edge, turning the corner just a little bit, and then fading it off to basically nothing. And anywhere that I can bottom out these lines is going to become important, right? Because this will give some weight to the bottom. Now, I'm not really drawing within the lines necessarily here, because it's not really important at this phase, right? I've got a little messy, I've got a little out here. That's okay. That's what gives these some life. Right. I'm just going to highlight this edge. I'm going to leave this as a broken line. This will just add a little bit of gentleness to the shape. Otherwise, if you go for too thick of outlines around this thing, it's going to look real bad really fast. Right. So just outline the engine housings. Right. And again, we're working in just really primitive shapes. Right? We're not trying to go super detailed at this phase. I'm just blocking out what this thing basically looks like. Right. Maybe I'll add a little taper to these. I think that might look pretty good. Right, like that. Run this out through the top. Right, like that. And I'm just going to go in and define those corners a bit. And that'll really help that look, really its best. So we're just going to really define some of those edges a little bit, right like that. I'm just going to hit up that corner right there, just along the top, separate this, and then let that line just hang along the top. I'm really only going to be hitting up the corners because I want it to just feel like it's a little bit higher. So thick lines towards the bottom is really what weights something down and gives it some structure. But anywhere that you have two planes that are meeting up, you see where my two knuckles here at the bottom are. You want to define this with one of them being a much thicker line. So if you look at this line here and this line here, I'm just going to thicken that one just a little bit right there, and that'll help separate those two out, which is going to generally look better. So just outline that a little bit, thicken that edge, ground that. See how much more that's just popping out the original? If you don't believe me, go back in time, take a look at the original. I can guarantee you this is already looking quite a bit better. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with, let's see, I started off with a 20, so I'm going to just jump to a 40, follow in, and I'm going to just reinforce my darker shadows, and eventually I go back with my 20 and expand my 20% out just a bit more, because I just know that this is just going to get darker and darker, and that's a good thing, right? I'm going to leave a little bit of an edge between my black line and my 30% gray right here, and that's just going to help create a little bit of accent lighting and push some of this out. I'm also going to just go ahead and shade in my large engine housings themselves, right? At least the back ones, right? Like this. I know I'm going to go darker with these at some point, so I just might as well get it away and over with right now. And so I'm just boldly shading that in. No big deal. Right? Big engine housings. We go back over this again with black along those edges. I'm just slowly going to work this thing up, right? Slowly, little by little, piece by piece. No big deal. Okay, right, like that. Okay. And it's okay, it is so okay to be a little messy from time to time, because you just want some of that organic feel to come from this. You want to feel like this was a ship that was, is designed. It has perfections and imperfections and things like that. So that's where this tends to matter. Now, so I've gone in with my 30. I'm going to kind of go back in with my 20%. Spread that. I'm probably going to spread that across the hull, across the entire hull, because my 20% is pretty mild comparatively, right? So I'm just going to run this up. I'm going to run this up almost completely to the top, right? We're going to cover the first 2/3 of this entire ship, and I am making an effort, as much as I can, to color inside the lines on all of this, right? Just like that. And I could go in and use my broad tip pen, but I feel like that's kind of a little fast for me, just when I'm doing this type of thing on my own. I like to go slow. I like to work my way up, but you'll notice that I'm working my way from lighter shades of gray into darker shades of gray. And that's making a huge difference. Right. Okay, I think we'll just square that piece off right there. Call it good. Alright, so from here, oh, hang on. We are going to go ahead and try to include this thing up here, I think. Hopefully I won't regret that, but if I do, that's what Photoshop's for. Alright, so a couple areas I need to work on. I need to enhance these, and I'm going in with a fatter marker, but I'm going really super light. Light touch, not really worrying too much if I get a perfectly straight line. That's not what this drawing is for. This drawing is to give me some of those fun little details that I can really work with, sink my teeth into, and all that. We're just going to enhance what we've done so far. Go and re-thicken those lines, right like that. See? Looking good. And then what we're going to do is we're going to embolden some of these little housings here. Now the reason that we're doing the little housings and not the big housings on the thrusters is because things that have darker lines tend to get pulled forward, right? So wherever you have two lines intersecting and you want one to look like it's definitely closer than the other, you use a nice thick line. and that will usually do the job that you want it to. So that's looking pretty slick there, pretty slick. Next we're going to go through and we're going to do another layer of detail. This time I'm going to jump just up to 50% because 50% is getting pretty dark. And this is where I want to be a bit more careful. I have been. We're just going to go through and outline, again, some of those shadows. It's just working our way. So we're pushing the shadows up, right? We're just working our way slowly to the top. Right, like so. And here I'm going to just clearly define my, dark mids and lights. So we're just going to go, okay, this is all facing down, right? This is midship. I'm just going to put all this in the dark, right? And, I kind of go, well, why were you spending all that time protecting this area and being gentle with it? Well, I didn't know, right? I was still kind of working out what these forms and shapes were. And it's totally okay to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. We're just working up the composition slowly into its final form, right? Outline that there. Send that right there. We've created this little lip here, right? So this is now this bent line. It's going to look really good by the time we're done with it. Ooh, loving it, loving it. All right, now I'm going to go back with another pass. I'm going to go with another pass at my 30%, and I can actually go in and add a little bit more dark here in a gentle way, right? This is more just blending at this point, but I'm creating a little bit more tone, a little bit more gradient right in here, right? And it's subtle, but we're slowly adding pigment to this region, right? Let's create a nice softer edge. Now I'm going to go in and add by 30 the line across the top here. This is just going to give me a nice clean edge running across the top, right? We're just creating a sense of structure on this thing. Okay. Probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up rounding this out, whereas halo ships are very angular. I'm going to keep the angularity from this profile edge, but as we look at it from the front, I'm probably going to go more round because I think that might just be enough of a different aesthetic to kind of warrant me kind of borrowing some of their elements, right? So we're just going to go through, do sections of the housing here, right? Just adding in that little detail, darkness, right like that. See? Now I can go through if I really want to and I'm going to create little diamond patterns here, right? Now what these are, I don't know. These might be missile pods, this might just be, hull plating details. I really couldn't tell you, and they don't really have to have a point yet. That's not why they're there. They're there just to add a little bit of interest to this design. Right? Okay, so that's looking good. Okay, now white is something that is good to have, but it's not necessary to have everywhere. I'm going to take my 20% and I'm just going to push this up just a little bit along the top, right? Just to reinforce these lines without actually making them full on black yet, right? Put my 20% right in here. I feel like it's time. I'm going to leave these alone. Just color them in really quick. And that's pretty good. Now you might be tempted to go, okay, that's looking great. I can stop now. You shouldn't. Right? This is where that really fine detail pen comes in. So from here, you're now able to go in and add, let's say, a little bit of cross-hatching, and it should follow the form. Right? We're just going to make this a little bit darker, as well as give it a little bit of texture, right? And it's tough to see there, but we've got some really fine lines. If you're in my classes, I'll show you. I'm just going to put those fine lines here and here. And I'm actually going to run these lines all the way across just to give it some texture. Again, this is so fine, it's actually not even showing up in the video, but in the image itself, it will be there. Right. Good. All right. We'll just run this like so. And create some detail there. Kind of see that. Okay, now around these housings themselves, I'm going to make them inset slightly by just drawing in a little bit of detail above them, right? Just a little bit below. And we're just using the tone that we made to outline it, right? Just so that it pops just a bit more, right? Because that is definitely what we're looking to do here. Okay, right like that. I'm going to go in, enhance this line across the top, here as well. Okay, so that gives me a rough idea of what my ship is going to look like. I can go in and add a few more details running across these lines here, right like that. Right. A few little detail lines, just kind of outlining some of those smudges that I made. Right. Enhancing some of these lines so those details really pop out. Right. A few of those bigger ones, a few of those little ones. Right. See, we're just kind of enhancing the little shapes that we can see. Okay, just like that. Okay. That's basically the idea behind how you do this. Now I can go a lot darker with this if I want. In fact, I may just on this ship just kind of to show you a little bit about how much darker that can go. So we'll just kind of outline some of these with a 90 right here. Push those bottom edges just a bit more in those really dark areas like that, right? And every time you go over this, every single time, it's going to become much grander, much better, much more contrasted, with a lot more detail, and it's going to get better. You know, your biggest enemy when it comes to this type of thing, especially this type of medium, which is a permanent medium, is you are always going to want to go conservative, and you should never ever go conservative with this. You always want to push just a little bit farther, and your natural sense of experience will eventually kick in, and you will know when enough is enough, because you have been there, you have seen it, and you know exactly what you should and shouldn't let happen with this business, right? See, so it's really important to just continue to push, continue to grow. Let yourself make a few mistakes every now and again, because if you just don't, you're just gonna ruin it. It's not gonna look good. You're not gonna feel good about what you did, and you're always gonna kind of question, you know, could I have done that better? How could I have made that better? So even then, even with that dark like that, we can still go in and reinforce some of those edges, right? See, let's make it so this is a little bit fuzzy here. It's going to get nice and sharp here real quick. Right? Nice sharp line. Even within itself, you can make a nice dark line running across it. Get some of that definition that you might have lost back. Right? Like that. Okay. Go in with your proper darks. Just throw in some of that detail. Just a touch. Just a smidge. Happy little trees, so to speak. Dark. Dark. Right? Okay. Put a little bit more here. Push that back. And that feels pretty good. So that's, that's really enough to like get to the point where you could start modeling comfortably. You don't have to make it perfect, but it'll give someone a better idea of what it's going to look like. So if you compare that to the battle cruiser as opposed to the battleship, one of these is much easier to read visually than this one is, right? This one's tough to tell exactly what's going on. This one has some form and some shape and some depth that this one just does not have. So otherwise, I think that's going to do it for this discussion on how to use these types of markers. Again, let's just kind of get a look at the whole set here. All told, this is about $35 to $40. It's well worth it. With the little time that we spent on this so far, we've easily taken something from a very simple, crude, basic drawing and actually given it some form and some shape. It is really this easy. You just have to have a little bit of guts. There's no Control Z for this, but honestly, it will make you better at pretty much everything that you can do. So, thank you very much. I'm Destin for Tech for Humans, and have yourselves a great day.